Hello, everybody, and welcome to a new year of Elevate Your Wellbeing Contagious Care. It's so good to be back in 2021. I hope everyone's had a beautiful break of replenishment and refreshment and restoration. And as we look in to our new year, I wonder how you would describe the first 3 weeks of this new year for you. Just put in the chat box in a word or two how your year has been so far. See what adjectives you can use. So, last year was certainly a year of differences and challenges, enormous challenges beyond what anyone would have ever imagined. You know, they did a survey of the most frequent words that were written last year. I want you to guess which they were. If you've been reading the newspapers, you would be able to identify with some words that have just constantly been out there in the news. What are the words that you have heard the most in the last 12 months describing 2020, the year of COVID? Just put them in the chat box. Hello, Linda. Hi, Anne from Sweden. Hi, Alison, my dear sister from the States. And just thinking about COVID and how it is for you, Anne, in Sweden, and Alison in the States, just how much more horrific it has been for you guys than us here in Australia. So we send our love to you and our thoughts, and praying for you in your different countries. So put in the chat box. We are in this together, Alison is saying. Lovely, lovely to hear that, Alison. So love hearts from Anne. Please put in your description of the year so far, and what words have you heard in the media the most? You see, the COVID crisis has brought us a lot of new words. We have ISO. We have the word bubble. We have the phrase COVID normal. We have flatten the curve, social distancing. I like the word physical distancing better than social distancing, because this whole session today, developing strength by leaning into each other, is about being social, being emotionally connected through different crises that just come our way, the curveballs that hurl into our lives, sometimes very quickly. So what are some of the other words that you have experienced that are the two most crucial words that you would see every day in the newspapers? Want to hear you put in the chat box. There's lockdown, and my favorite word is referring to a person that refuses to follow any of the health advice, you know, in the States, not putting your masks on, in lots of other countries, including Australia as well. But just what we have, what's the word that you think has come up referring to the person that refuses to follow any health advice whatsoever? They're called COVIDiots. That's the new word of the year. And Alita has put in unprecedented. That's right. And stay at home. And so the two most common words last year in the news were pandemic and unprecedented. So the Macquarie Dictionary came up with the word of the year being doom scrolling. And I think I referred to that in a previous session. If you can imagine the endless barrage of constant scrolling through bad news, even when it's saddening, disheartening, and depressing, the barrage of endless bad news with bushfires here in Australia, the bad news of the US elections and what has stemmed from that at the core of the country, Trump's antics, I won't say any more, and of course the ongoing COVID crisis with border closures and the uncertainty that that's brought all of us. So the more we do this doom scrolling, the worse we're going to feel. But many people still keep seeking out what's happening overdosing on it. I'm not talking about just catching up with the news. I catch up with the news, for 20 minutes in a day. Certainly don't want to do that first thing in the morning because it really sets a tone for the day. So choose your timing. But we need to find out what's happening. But the doom scrolling, keeping on seeking and finding what's happening and feeling discouraged as a consequence, that becomes our major mindset. So when bad things happen in our lives, often we get discouraged and despondent. And today, our 49th session, we're going to be looking at developing strength by leaning into each other as we start a new year. How can we lean into each other? So put in the chat box already how you would describe your year thus far. And I'm going to give you a little analogy of sunflowers that help us look at how we can lean in towards each other to deal with any crisis or curveball that comes our way. Now, sunflowers, as you would know, turn according to the position of the sun. In other words, they chase the light. I'll never forget when John and I rode through Tuscany in Italy from the town of Siena into Rome, and it was 350 kilometers we did over about 6 days. And for one of those days, we were going through fields and fields of sunflowers that on both sides of the road. It was just the most glorious country scene you could imagine. And of course, all the sunflowers were facing the sun. They chase the light. Now, you probably already know that, but there's a fact that you might not know about sunflowers. Have you ever wondered what happens when on a cloudy or a rainy day, when the sun's completely covered by the clouds? What do? Put in the chat box if you know. Perhaps you think the sunflower withers like this. I'm going to tell you a story about this in a minute. Maybe it withers or turns its head towards the ground. Is this what's crossed your mind? Well, that's not correct. This is what actually happens. They turn towards each other to share their energy. Now, nature's perfection is amazing, isn't it? I wish we could apply this reflection to our lives. Mindy, hi Mindy, you're saying the sunflowers drooped a bit. This is the funny story I have to tell. You see, I had this vision of planting 2 sunflowers that I could bring in this morning and show you as an illustration of what it would be like to follow the sun and also turn towards each other in times of shade, all right? What happened, as it turned out, a bunch of marauding cockatoos came and ate every single bit of the sunflower seed in here and disabled me from showing you these gorgeous sunflowers that I originally had. They just cut back the sunflowers completely. And isn't that the way in our lives? We have the best laid plans. I had a beautiful story and I've got 2 pots to show you my other way, our sunflowers. This was here are 2 plants leaning into each other. They were supposed to be sunflowers, but these are other plants that are leaning in towards each other, and just pretend that they are sunflowers right now. We have to do plan B, don't we? When our plan A simply does not work, when marauding cockatoos just come and eat the sunflowers. That's why they're drooping. Mindy, hi Carmen. And the sun, Mindy's saying we have a bunch of them by us. Seems like that's what they did, yes. So when the cockatoos come into our life, isn't that the way sometimes with adverse events? The best laid plans can come crushing down upon us, either from the marauding cockatoos, external to us, or other life events. And our challenge is, how do we get back up again when we seem to be chopped down to size? Because we need to reseed, we need to re-nurture, we need to regrow, redevelop, and then spring back into life again. So we need to be aware of the risks of the cockatoo damage, but wanting to try again as hope springs eternal. So how can we best lean in towards each other? What have you found helpful? For the people that are here, Alison's saying it's hard, but there's many positives that still come with each day. What can we see, even if our sunflowers are drooping? What can we do to lean in towards each other to find strength? Now, it's easier for some to do this than others. Many people have a natural inclination to be a lone ranger. Just put in the chat box whether you tend to have your natural inclination as a lone ranger, just keeping things to yourself, or whether it's easier for you to share openly. Just put in the chat box there's no right or wrong, it's just what is your inclination, and then you discerning how you want to be different, if you do want to be different. You see, to tough it out all on your own does make it harder for you. I had someone tell me that they were reaching out a lot to people, and I know this person who does that, but just finds that people aren't leaning in to him or there when he needs that help. Mindy's saying, I'd rather find someone to share with. Yeah. So are you a lone ranger, or would you prefer to find somebody to share with? And I wonder if you can put in the chat box, why don't we, when there's a time when you don't lean in towards a trusted friend, why is it that we find it hard to face our hardships? And when we don't lean in, why is it that we don't lean in when we know that it would be helpful to share our hardship with somebody else? I was reflecting on this because I've gone through something myself, an adversity over these last 7 months. And it's been challenging for me in just who I share with, what I share, and what I don't share, because I don't want to this to identify me, and I'll share a bit about this in a minute. But not wanting to trouble someone is a big part of why we don't connect through troubled times. In our Aussie culture, I'll say specifically, it's about, there's the phrases, she'll be right, mate, and not looking underneath at what is really troubling us can be part of our culture sometimes. And I had a cycling acquaintance just the other day sharing about, as we were cycling in a group, but he was sharing about his post-traumatic stress from war. And the very next ride, he apologized to me for sharing about that, for putting that onto me. And I told him that in his sharing, he actually gave me a beautiful gift. See, whilst he thought he was oversharing, to me, it was a gift, because in him sharing, he'd given the gift to me of allowing me to have more insight into him as a person and into his history, which is all of him, or part of him that makes up the all. And also he gave me so much more insight into post-traumatic stress from war and how it still affects us decades later. So the gift of trust, is what I was explaining to him, is a priceless gift. And other people are saying here, you're sharing with others, and Carmen, I love my alone time, but also love people, and I love chatting with family and friends. And Alison's saying, sending cards to others during this lockdown time with restricted social opportunities. So these things are really important to be intentional about connecting. What are some of the other reasons? What are our stumbling blocks? Some of the other reasons that we don't lean in to be able to share our load with a trusted friend. I've found that for some people, particularly my clients, they talk about the fear of looking weak, and men have this particular problem more so because of the way, sadly, there's been that the environment of training, of parenting boys different to girls. Now we've got a much better gender equality in terms of the way we parent, but there's still this insidious little subconscious things that are happening there between differences with boys and girls. And so it is harder for men to share because of the way they've been raised. Carmen's saying pride, too right. Pride and fear of, it's a wrong belief that it looks weak. It's actually a strength to be vulnerable. A tremendous strength to choose to be vulnerable in the right times with the right people that are going to be helpful. Mindy's saying you don't want to seem like a needy person, and not Alison not wanting to burden others. Yeah, so what does it require to change our faulty belief that it's looking weak, or that it's wrong to share something that might, you know, we have a belief that it's going to burden others. When this acquaintance shared with me on the bike, even on the bike as we were cycling recreationally, I did not feel one bit of burden. I felt compassion. I felt more of a like towards this person, more of an understanding and care, and I had so much more respect for him. Not that I didn't have respect before, but my respect level was heightened enormously for what he had gone through. And so the fact that he had the courage to share that, I just, you know, there was no sense of thinking he was weak and no sense of me being burdened. So sometimes we actually project a very faulty belief onto other people that they're going to be burdened, whereas it actually builds a friendship of strength and resilience in us. Alita's saying the timing needs to be right. It sure does. And the person needs to be right. You know, when we think about what we need in order to trust someone so you can lean on them through hard times, I want you to just put in the chat box what you need in order to trust someone. Because you see, something happened to me just 2 days ago with our dear grandson, Oliver. He's 3.5. And trust just expanded enormously for me in my heart through this incident. You see, we live at the mouth of a river. And so the tides are really strong every 6 hours coming in or out, and from the ocean. And so John and I were taking our twin grandchildren with our daughter stand up paddling. And each of the children were going to sit on the stand up paddles. And so because it was at high tide, I took the grandchildren out onto our deck and looked at the river and showed them how it was going to be, because we had never stand-up paddled with them before, with them sitting securely on the stand-up paddles. We'd never taken them in a high tide before. And so I wanted to make them extra safe and extra and confident for when the tide was coming in with a bit of a swell. So I said to Oliver, we'll let the tide take us down. And he said, Nana, how far will it take us down? How deep will it take us down in the water? And this was sublime trust, a level of
blind trust that just melted me in that moment 2 days ago, because he was thinking in the high tide with the current coming in, it was going to take us down under the water instead. And all I meant to say was, I had to change my words. No, it will take us down. It won't take us down under the water. It'll take us down the way the river flows. So it'll take us across the water. I couldn't think of a better word. Across. It was going to take us the way the river is flowing. But he thought it was going to take us down. And he still had that trust in me that it was okay. And so, yes, it was a level of naivety, but the trust, I pondered on that level of trust, enormous trust he had in me, because he just looked at me with his blue eyes, deep blue eyes, as if to say, okay, whatever you say, but how deep will it be? And so I'm thinking later, how can we build that trust in a friend like that, where we can talk about the hard stuff? What is required of us to take that step to talk about the hard stuff when we're going through hard stuff? And Carmen saying, we appreciate people being authentic with us, so we should be authentic with others. Oh, Carmen, I couldn't say that more aptly. That's beautiful, because that's what we appreciate, just like I've shared with my cycling acquaintance. And we appreciate that. And so we need to step out and do the same. And often we have a double standard. We're happy to hear people sharing with us, but we reserve that honesty and vulnerability when it's our turn, when we could be sharing what's going on for us. Mindy's saying confidentiality is really important. Yes, so important to develop those trustworthy friends. And Alison saying not everyone responds in the same way, so there can be apprehension in not knowing how some people will respond. And oh dear sweet Oliver, what a lesson. Yes, as you've said, Alison, what a lesson he taught me in that moment. Leaning in when we're struggling. I find it hard too. I've had, as I shared earlier, my adversity over these last 7 months. I've gone through 14 major lung tests and heart tests with constant fatigue and a breathlessness that I have had now since the middle of June last year, that is on, it always comes upon me, that breathlessness, when I'm exerting myself in any way, even climbing up the 8 stairs of our house. And it's so unusual for me just to even walk up the slight hill that we're on. I get so puffed, and before I could just power walk up and no issue. Cycling up steep hills, little breathlessness, the normal amount of breathlessness, but nothing major like this. So it's been a massive change for me, and the breathlessness and fatigue have not had any medical answers after going to the top hospitals and the top lung physicians in Australia. And so all I've had coming back to me is that it's a post-viral syndrome. So I found out that I had glandular fever antibodies in my system, but no further answers on how to deal with chronic fatigue except what I can do in this process. And the most important thing that I've learnt through dealing with this, as I learnt 11 years ago when I got cancer, is to listen to my body, respect what it's saying, have the rest and replenishment that I need in the moments that I need it, and not to be afraid of my own vulnerability, but to reach out and connect and receive support and encouragement and strength. No one's going to know if I don't share what's going on for me and why I might be different, and why I can't do things the way I used to, and why I can't say yes to all the things that I used to be able to say yes to. So I'm relying on God and my trusted friends that He's provided, and I have to do my part though. That's the important thing. I have to do my part to choose to look for the good things in each day and to make room for a crisis or adversity to be able to process it and grieve and move through it, to face it courageously, to be able to move through it. So, what can we do to find a truly trustworthy and wise friend? Who is in your tribe that you can count on? I've always found that when I'm in the company of a wise person, I can gradually empty my cup, but then fill it with all they have to offer. And when I get home, just to spend a bit of time discerning on what is right or most helpful that they've offered. Keep the nuggets of gold and let the other unuseful stuff just float away. So discernment, I've found, is a really important thing. Discernment in choosing your friends wisely, and discernment in allowing yourself to be vulnerable enough to be able to receive the wisdom and guidance that people do have to offer. Christine's saying that you had glandular fever 5 years ago and it took lemonade, gradually more Guinness than lemonade. It gave me back the energy. Guinness and lemonade. Guinness, are you talking about beer, Christine? I'm just I'm curious whether I've read that wrongly. And hello, Ratha from Vietnam. So welcome to all those people in Rhonda who are coming in now as well. I hope this session's been helpful. Wow, yes, okay. I'm not a beer drinker. Shame it's not wine and lemonade. Anyway, I just want to encourage you to be brave through any crisis that you have been going through, any little hiccups that you are going through. Be life-giving to yourself and to others, to look at the constructive things that you are grateful for, to be life-giving and to let your light shine. So welcome to the new year, everyone. And in response to my rest and replenishment that I'm putting into example, I'm acting on what I'm saying here. That's why we're just having Elevate Your Wellbeing Contagious Care sessions once a fortnight now on the 1st and 3rd Tuesday of each month. And also we'll be having lots of wonderful guest speakers every second month on average. So looking forward to introducing you to some wonderful guest speakers, and that will be our new system of me listening to my body and taking care to replenish and rest. So all the best as you develop a sunflower trait in leaning in, turning inwards towards the people you can trust, and let your cloudy or gloomy days be more filled with sunshine as you lean in to each other. Spread the goodness, because it will come back to you.